Hey, this is Dave Davidson from Gargoyl, and you're listening to the Progcast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Progcast. I'm your host Dario, and calling today from Boston, Massachusetts is Dave Davidson from Gargoyl. Hi Dave, how is it going?
I'm doing good, Dario. Thanks for having me on.
Fans of tech death metal might know your name from Revocation, but you have a new project, as we just heard, and that project is called Gargoyl. And maybe you can introduce us to the how this project came to be in the first place, and with whom you started it.
Sure. So I started this band with Luke Roberts a few years back. Luke and I had met when Revocation was on tour. His band Ayahuasca had opened for us, and I was already a big fan of Ayahuasca. He also plays in a anonymous black metal band, which I cannot reveal the title of, but I'm a big fan of them as well. And we just sort of got the talking, where there was a mutual respect for one another as musicians. And we just kind of hit it off and talked about maybe doing a project. When I got home from that tour, sent Luke some ideas. We just started trading ideas back and forth all over the internet because Luke is from Toronto. We actually ended up writing songs relatively quickly. So we were clicking right off the bat when we were writing together. So yeah, we started off with nothing, and pretty quickly we just started writing song after song, and the floodgates just really opened up creatively. So that was the beginning of the band.
All right, and then you released an EP with 2 songs, I think last year or 1.5 years ago, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of landed you a deal with Season of Mist, and there you are about to release your self-titled debut album, right?
Yeah.
So the 2 songs on the EP, they are also, or the titles are also to be found on the album. Did you re-record the songs or just took them as they were?
Oh no, we re-recorded them entirely. So the EP songs were really just demos. I mean, they didn't even have real drums on them.
All right.
So I think they sounded good for a demo, but the songs on the actual record sound so much better. Everything from the performances to the quality of the recording, and we changed it up a little bit here and there. Like on the EP that we did, it's a guitar solo on the end of Acid Crown, and on the actual record we have a saxophone solo there from my friend Eric.
Yeah. Now to the probably difficult question of today. How would you describe the sound of Gargoyl?
Let's just keep it simple and call us prog rock.
That was a short answer, and well, there's certainly something to it, but I would say there's especially with the prog rock label, I would say I just had an interview recently with Stefan Alzar from Swedish band called Prehistoric Animals, and they are also somewhat prog rock, but also have a little darker vibe at some points, and also a little bit heavier at some points. And just like, when I say progressive rock, the first association would be either, Genesis or Yes, or then, I don't know, Flower Kings or Spock's Beard or Marillion or something of that sort. And, well, the Gargoyle sound is a tad different, so to say.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Well, I think about we're progressive in the true sense of the word, where, when you, it's funny, certain genres, like, you start to associate with different bands, and I think that's why people want to try to put all these labels on it. But you strip all that stuff away. I mean, certainly there's heavy metal tendencies of the band, right? There's no death metal influence in the vocals or anything like that, but there's certainly really heavy moments, really dissonant moments. But I think some of that aggression can come from, you know, a strong rock influence. And then as far as the progressive label is concerned, I mean, we're really trying to push the boundaries of what people's preconceptions of rock or preconceived notions of rock is. I mean, certainly I can really scratch that death metal, thrash metal itch with Revocation, where there's, you know, blast beats and brutal vocals. You know, this is coming from a very it's inspired by bands like, you know, of that grunge era in a lot of ways. But there's also other more maybe like esoteric influences on there, like the band Virus is a big influence on us. You know, even elements of black metal or you know, weird bands like, I don't know, like Dysrhythmia and stuff like that. Like there's so many influences to this band, but I think at the end of the day, like everyone's gonna have their own sort of, everyone's gonna put their own label on it. So for me, I think it's just easier just to call us a weird progressive rock band or a dark progressive rock band and then call it a day. But some people have called it progressive grunge. Some people have called it, you know, goth rock, prog metal. Like there's all these different labels that have been put on Gargoyl so far, which is great for me, because that just means like we're hard to categorize, and that's exactly what I wanted to do with this project. I mean, one song might have like a jazzy Opeth kind of vibe to it, and then the next song might sound like a weird, like, you know, have a weird disco beat on it and sound like this bizarro song that like is inspired by like Virus or something like that. So there's a lot of influences on the record. I think the record needs to be listened to like as a whole, but I think when you hear the whole thing and hear what we're going for, even though there's a lot of different peaks and valleys and dynamics and really different influences on there, I think the entire record, when you listen to it as a whole, feels very cohesive to me. It feels like an artistic statement, and it kind of just opens up the door for us to kind of do whatever we want within the confines of this sound.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I had the pleasure of listening to it for the last 1.5 weeks or something. So I went back to it at least once a day in the last days, and it's a lot of fun. It's what I found very interesting is that, like you said, some people are putting a grunge label on it, and I have to admit I was never really a big fan of grunge, but the Gargoyle sound immediately appealed to me. Maybe because it was so, or it is so proggy and weird and dissonant at times. So that absolutely unique mixture definitely worked for me. And I have, as you also said, I had some associations in my mind, primarily with the with the vocal harmonies, which are quite specific. It took me like half a week or something and 5 to 10 playthroughs to find that band in my mind that I was looking for, and it's a Canadian band called Heaven's Cry. Especially their first 2 albums, Food for Thought Substitute and Primal Power Addiction from 1997 and 2002, have that kind of similar vocal harmony vibe here and there. I have the feeling. And another association that I had in my mind was the 90s era King Crimson.
Mm-hmm.
So that were my thoughts when listening to Gargoyle, and just kept coming back to the album. So
Great. Well, thank you. I mean, for me, it's cool because every person that's going to listen to it so far, from what it seems like to me from who I've talked to about it, like they're getting different associations, or it's reminding them of different things. And I think that's cool because like it's always different. So I think it just makes this music hard to classify. I mean, at the end of the day, like any project that I'm involved with, I wanted to have its own unique voice and not necessarily sound like anything else or anything that people have heard before. Maybe there's some things that might remind them about different bands, but yeah, like I've said from the reviews I've seen, and or just like different what people's takes on it have been like from fans and the feedback I've gotten, it's all so very different. So I think that's cool that it, like when someone else hears this music, like at first they find it like very hard to categorize, which is great because I want it to be its own thing.
Yeah, but it also can be kind of a disadvantage. Yeah, just for people discovering it because they're not sure what to expect if they read reviews that are kind of contradicting or just saying something different. Yeah, don't you think?
Well, for me, like I'm not really too concerned with like critics and this and that, especially because the record I think is going to take a while to grow on people. So I think people are gonna get it, and if they don't get it right away, like hopefully they'll get it with like several listens because it's not like an easily digestible record. I think there's like some real beauty to it, but it's not just like like a pop rock record that you're gonna throw on and like just like immediately like get like the song structures. I think a lot of the songs to me are super catchy, but I also realize like I'm into like really weird like avant-garde shit. So I think we write music first and foremost for ourselves. I mean like this band certainly is a product of my and Luke's like love of different genres of rock and like we said some like avant-garde influences. So this was a record that I feel like we both really had to make, and yeah, hopefully people like enjoy it and come along for the ride. But I think either way, it's gonna make you feel something.
Okay. Funnily enough, two of the latest episodes or the interviews I had this week, two other interviews. I also like the one with Stefan Alzar I mentioned, and the other one is with a Australian band called Chaos Divine that will come out. That episode will come out after this episode here, and with both bands or artists, at one point we talked about the perseverance of not giving up too quickly with certain prog records or with certain records that might not appeal immediately to you, and then after a while, if you keep persisting and keep coming back to it, it might reward you with an amazing listening experience.
Indeed, yeah.
And maybe we can dive into the avant-garde shit you just teased later. You also said that of course it's the you and Luke Roberts, you're the main guys behind the project. But listening to the album, I also strongly feel that the bass and the drum parts are just as equally important and crazy and tricky and proggy and make the album what it is. So who's playing with you on there?
Yeah, I mean Brett Lear is the bass player, an incredible musician. He's got tons of skill and also a great ear, and he's able to come up with like really awesome bass lines. And we were able to collaborate together on some bass lines as well, which is cool. He's for as skilled as he is, he's very open to different ideas. So I found Brett incredibly easy to work with and incredibly inspiring to work with because he's such a pro, and yeah, just a great teammate overall, and then also a great singer. And then James Nurl, our drummer, he is just a phenom. I mean, just an incredible performer. Tons of technical ability, but also tons of grooves. Sometimes with drummers, it's kind of like one or the other, where it's like, a guy's got like tons of technical skill, but maybe like the groove department is lacking a little bit, or vice versa. But his pocket is great, and he also has just tremendous technical ability. I remember being in the studio. We tracked the drums at God City in Salem, which is Kurt Ballou from Converge's studio, and like me and the recording engineer Chris Johnson, who was recording the drums, were just like laughing like at how good his takes were. He was just like crushing it behind the kit. Anyway, so yeah, the drums and bass are definitely integral parts of our music. They're certainly not afterthoughts in any way. I think they really sort of contribute to our sound and to our style. And that was sort of one of the things that we wanted to embrace, like early on when Luke and I were talking, because we both play in heavier bands, like that I think that strange element is always going to come through, whether it's like some might call it abrasive or dissonant or whatever. Like there's always going to be some grit, I think, to the music that we write. In some ways, it's because we love to listen to that, and it's sort of like in our blood. But like there were certain drum beats that we almost wanted to shy away from, not to like limit ourselves, but because like we already kind of explore those sounds so much in our other bands. So we had to kind of come up with like other approaches to thinking about things rhythmically in order to to keep different grooves, but also to kind of like inspire ourselves from a rhythmic standpoint and kind of put ourselves outside of our comfort zone. So there's a song, for example, on the record called Ambivalent Eye, a song that I wrote that's got this like weird, like almost like disco beat from like outer space on it or something like that like really drives the music, but just like adds a different kind of swing to it entirely than maybe what some people like would expect. And that's definitely like inspired by different bands like Virus and bands of that nature that like are like have this weird kind of dark edge to them, but like the rhythms underneath almost have like a danceable quality to them. So I think combining this weird kind of dissonant riffage with like this like kind of upbeat sort of dancey syncopated drum groove, I don't know, it just does something to the ear that's like very unexpected and hopefully surprising and enjoyable. I know for me that's a song that I really love on that record. Luke's vocal performance is incredible, and in addition to the instrumentation that the bass and drums provide on that song, it really like made the guitar riffs come to life.
For that song, I actually wrote down Haken Goes Avant-Garde. That was my association for that song in particular.
Okay, yeah. So I never listened to all of the bands that you've mentioned. I've never listened to.
Yeah, I kind of thought that might be the case, but I wanted to drop those names anyhow.
Yeah. But it's funny, you know what I mean? Because you're getting these associations, and like these bands weren't influences, so it's kind of interesting. I think everyone goes in. I mean, the mind is such an interesting thing, and like in everyone's psychology, it's like you bring something of yourself to the music when you're listening to it. I've heard it been said before that like, when you're creating music, right? You're writing music for yourself or for your bandmates in the beginning, and you have a certain sense of ownership over that, obviously. But when you put it out into the world, it becomes everyone's music. It becomes like everyone has a certain sort of ownership over that, in the sense that like how like something that I was thinking when I wrote the song, it might connect with a person and remind them of something like totally different, but it still connects with them on this like emotional level because it reminds them of a time in their life, and then all of a sudden that musical statement becomes that much stronger because they're attaching it to a certain feeling or mood or band or something that's nostalgic that they grew up listening to, that they can't put their finger on of why it reminds them of that, but it does. So I think that's kind of one of the beautiful things about music, is it's so much a part of the sort of collective unconscious or whatever once it goes out into the ether like that.
And that was actually something I talked about with Farida from Molasses, and that episode is going to come out 1 week probably after this episode, and they also have their debut album coming up on Season of Mist.
Label mates.
Yes, exactly, but a little bit of different sound, more psychedelic.
Yeah,
and but interesting that some of the themes that we're talking about this week, or that I'm talking about this week, where I have quite a lot of interviews, keep popping up. One question I wanted to ask about the songwriting process. So when Brett and James joined the band, did you have already most of the songs written together with Luke, or did they have the chance to have input there?
The songs were mostly written between Luke and I. I would say, like they were probably 95% there. But I think it's always good to, when you're working on a record and leading up to that recording, nothing's ever set in stone until the record goes off to get pressed, right? So I'm a big proponent of the notion that, like, things can and should change while you're in rehearsals and while you're in a studio environment as well. I mean, I think it's cool to like take risks in the studio and to add that kind of wild card element in there. Certainly because, like, I don't know, it's just like an inspiring environment. I mean, here you are recording these songs for real. You're getting the takes down. You might be hearing different things, listening to them on different studio monitors or listening to playback through different amps. I always like to leave the door open for creativity and for those, like, to allow creative thought to flow in any environment of the writing process. Like, I never want to write a song and just think like, okay, it's done. I wrote it and I took one pass at it and okay, this is good enough and we're going to just leave it at it as is. I think in refining something and constantly going back and working it, it's like a piece of clay or something that you're like molding. So, just always leaving the door open for creativity in every single element of the process, I think, is important. And so that being said, we had the structures primarily finished and the parts primarily finished. But, like, if James was doing a take in a studio, like, we would try different things and just, like, I would throw out an idea or he would throw out an idea. And if it worked, it worked. Same thing with the bass.
Cool. You mentioned also that Brett is an amazing vocalist. So, but the vocals are all performed by Luke on the album.
Correct. Yeah, Luke recorded them all in his home studio.
Yeah, the intro, "Truth of a Tyrant," is entirely a cappella. So it's it starts off on a strong note vocally, and especially
Yes.
vocal harmony wise. But now having a good second vocalist in the band certainly might be interesting for future endeavors, both maybe in future records or if circumstances worldwide will allow it also in the live setting. So do you have any plans further than releasing the album finally now?
To tour?
Both, anything.
Well, I mean, we're gonna, the record's coming out, so we're gonna promote it in any way that we can. But there's no plans to tour right now. I mean, I would love to, but I'm already seeing bands cancel tours that were rescheduled. In my estimation, like, nothing is gonna happen for the rest of this year, and I would be surprised if tours happen in the spring. I think earliest would be the summertime. Potentially, like, maybe even the fall of next year. It's too tough to say without a vaccine.
Yeah.
And also, like, without the proper. I mean, we're still learning so much about this pandemic. So I think there's just too many variables. I think anyone that tells you they know is probably.
Yeah. So here in Germany, we actually have concerts again, like this socially distanced, seated venues, limited capacity. So I've already talked a bit here on the show in previous editions. So we have, like, in a venue where normally 1,200 people would fit, it's now seated with 200 people. And
it's just the cost of doing business with tour is so high. So, like,
absolutely,
you can't really, like, the margins are so small to cut them by like a quarter. or to cut it down to a quarter. I just don't know how that's going to be. Like for a local band, sure.
Yeah,
You know, you're just driving down the street or you know 20 miles or whatever. But like to really go on tour and have plane tickets and in a tour bus or rent a van and rent gear, it's just incredibly expensive to put like you know a crazy cap on it. I mean, unless the government is coming in and subsidizing those types of things and paying bands like their full guarantee, but you know, I've already heard like touring bands would have to take a hit from their money and, you know, obviously like from merch and all these things. So, you know, you already have to operate with pretty slim margins given the cost of doing business is so high. So, we'll see. I think it's great that some local things are coming back, but as far as like picking it up and doing like a show on the road where you do like 30 tour dates, I just don't know if it's sustainable for a touring band.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, most of the bands playing here are local, and we just had Ginger playing last week. That was like the big exception, the only international band I think in the scene right now, in the metal scene, that I know went on tour here. The others are all German at least, but then again, we never know how this plays out in the next weeks, as we see with our neighbors in the Netherlands, in Holland. They are close to a second lockdown now because their numbers are rising again.
Right.
So that could happen here just as well. Disregarding the global situation regarding the pandemic now, you could see at some point in the future to bring Gargoyl to the stage.
Oh yeah, for sure. Of course. I mean, we did a little mini tour. This was like, you know, last year or whatever, where we played a few shows in the States that were all really fun. So I would love to get back out there and do that more. It's just, you know, when you ask me if there's any plans right now, I mean, we don't have any plans just because like if we book something, it's probably going to get canceled.
Yeah. But it's not gonna stay like a studio project. So if the opportunity arises,
yes, if the opportunity arises, I would love to go out on tour and really support this record and play these songs live, because I think they'll be really cool live. There's so many different dynamics on this record, as I mentioned before, and I think people that do pick up the record and sit with it are going to hopefully really vibe with it and hopefully want to see these songs performed live. So fingers crossed this pandemic gets under control and there's a universal vaccine that's safe and effective and easy to distribute, and we can get back out on the road sometime, you know, next year or possibly the year after at the latest. But you know, who knows? At that point, maybe we'll already be writing the next record.
Yeah, but I was just looking at the track list and thinking, when the a cappella intro "Truth of a Tyrant" ends and then "Plastic Nothing" starts with that crazy off-kilter riff, and it's just thinking about that puts a smile on my face, and then thinking about seeing that live, I think that my grin would be pretty wide because it's just so much fun.
Hell yeah, thanks, man. See, we're getting you excited already.
Absolutely. Rounding off this fun chat about music, we have a little section in the Progcast that we like to call "What's in Your Walkman?" So is there anything you've been listening to lately that you would like to share with us that we could add to the playlist as well that we're compiling for this episode?
Sure. Yeah. Is it in sort of the metal world, or?
It's totally open. Can be anything. Can be pop, hip hop, anything you want. We're not the prog gatekeepers here.
Okay. Well, if you like heavier stuff, I went down a death metal rabbit hole recently, and I became a really big fan of this band, Cosmic Putrefaction. They're a newer band. They put out a new record. It's got a long title. Let me see what the album title is. Give me 1 second here. Album title is called "The Horizon Toward Which Splendor Withers." Really, any track off that record is great. It's just like if you like sort of like an old school death metal approach, but with some really weird riffing and unique, like just a unique voice to the music. I would say check that out. Also, Dimensions by Lantern. I really like that. It also has sort of like an old school kind of aesthetic, but like I don't know, like the main riff writer in that band just has a really good ear for just out there riffs that just sounds super unique, and it just grabbed me. Grabbed me right away. As far as other things that I'm listening to, let me see here. I was going on a little bit of a Ben Monder kick recently. I'm a big fan of Ben Monder. He's got a record called Hydra, I believe, and you probably can't play Hydra on your show because it's almost 25 minutes long, but just an absolutely insane piece of music. I remember playing it for a few guitar player buddies of mine, and it like freaked them out so much. They're like this is like giving me like an anxiety attack. This is like such crazy music. So yeah, if you want to hear where some of those kind of weird, unnerving influences came from, Ben Monder was definitely one of them. He's a great avant-garde jazz guitar player, composer from the New York area.
Great. Those are all three artists I've never heard of. I'm super curious to check them out, and it's actually a standalone playlist apart from the podcast itself. So I can
cool.
I can absolutely put a 20-minute song in there. And
all right.
Usually what I do is also put best of the band in there, but since you only have the one record now, maybe I can throw in some Revocation and Ayahuasca
sure
as well.
Perfect.
I also have some recommendations that also kind of popped up with this grunge prog / avant-garde prog theme. So last year there was or was it this year? No, it was last year. I think it was last year. Anyway, a French band called Natural Disorder. They play some kind of grunge prog as well, or
cool.
proggy grunge. The album is called Corrosion and Passion, and I recommend the song Run. And I will put that in a playlist. Another band that's been mentioned in association with Gargoyl sound by reviews and in the press release and wherever, whatever. And I can absolutely see this connection sound-wise would be Voivod. And I was super happy to get reminded to actually listen to the EP, The End of Dormancy, that they put out earlier this year. I only had listened to the title track, so to speak, but on the EP there's also a live version of that one from the jazz festival in Montreal.
Yeah, that's an incredible piece.
Montreux, not Montreal.
I love Voivod. We toured with them. Revocation did, and they're just incredible musicians.
So yeah, the End of Dormancy has a similar kind of weird vibe as Gargoyl, I would say, and maybe even weirder. Definitely at times more hectic and more mathy would be a project or a band called Autocatalytica, and they are about to drop their, I think, third album on October 16. And it's called Power Clashing Maximalism, and we at the Progspace actually premiered the first single from that album. It's called Zippler, the song. Super crazy stuff. Those would be my 3 entries for the accompanying playlist to this episode of the Progcast. Dave, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Super excited about the release of Gargoyl's debut album, self-titled debut album. all the best with the release, and hope to see you on the road again at some point down the road, as they say. Thanks for being on the show. Thank you guys out there for listening, and as always, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and listen to weird music.
Thank you so much for having me, Dario. I really appreciate the interview, and I'm glad you're digging the record, and I hope you all listening will enjoy it too. Thanks again, man.
The Progcast is a production of Stewis Media and is presented by the Progspace. It is produced by Randy M. Salo, Janine Stango-Lewis, Blake Lewis, Kai Metzner, and Dario Albrecht. Our theme music is by This Is Not an Elephant.